I'm excited about this because one of the things that I think past too. So I want to tell two quick things about our historical connection. The first time I ever met Brad was in 2009 at the Ace Hotel. I was there. So right. So when I started to work for First Round Capital had an office at the time in West Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Not only that, like Howard had an office for all of his various activities. We know Howard, he's got like 9 things going on at once, but it was like really Howard's office, and it wasn't really like a first round office. So I didn't really have any place to work. Nick Bilton, who wrote the Twitter blog, invited me out for coffee one time. I don't pay to be misinterpret this invite or, what's actually going on here. And I'd never been to the Ace Hotel and was the summer that like first opened. So I walk in and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like, are these people staying here or not? They're just kind of like in the lobby and hanging out. I was like, I'm just going to keep working out of here. And this is going to be some sort of thing. And it was during a time of like when people were checking in on Foursquare and so like when a New York VC constantly checks in on Foursquare at the Ace Hotel and they give you the Wi-Fi for free, a bunch of founders start showing up. Right? Eventually it became very difficult for me to get any work done whatsoever. I constantly run into people there and I got introduced. They were working on a company called Superconductor, which I thought was a really awesome name for a superconductor for a company. And they said, yeah, we're building out this like education space and all this other stuff. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And I love the name. I'm like, oh, no, that name is just a placeholder. We're to call it General Assembly. And I was like, oh, that's a terrible name. I really hate the name. So if any of you have any name consulting, whatever I think, do the opposite. So this day, I still think Superconductor is a much better name than General Assembly. $100-something million later, we know about that. Brad and I have known each other for quite a long time. I taught General Assembly and co-works in the beginning days of General Assembly when there was some spaces there. But then the other thing I think back to early on is I saw an interview with Brad. And it was Shiloh Brown did start Go Cross Campus. And it was a series called The Founders and Fit. And it was all about like startups that didn't quite make it. This remember that and I take this back to like every interview I do since then, is it was a really, really fantastic story. It was incredibly entertaining to watch. And there's a guy sitting in the back of the room, big yellow like legal hat, like ready to write notes. And everybody was like really taken in by the story. It was very entertaining. That guy didn't write a single thing down, because the structure of that interview was more story than takeaway, right? And so I always think back to like, wow, well, what a missed opportunity that was, that somehow the interview questions and all of this stuff wasn't distilled down to like, what can that person walk away from? So I always try to view interviews stemming from King, knowing that like, Brad is a super knowledgeable person and I want to have 10 things written down. So that's my goal, because I want to fix that original interview that was done back then. And like, I don't want to see any blank pages. And if you have a blank page, that's my fault. So that's my motivation as an MC for these interviews. I want to make sure you have something to write it down. And so, if you don't, it's not Brad's fault. It's definitely my fault.
And also don't interview anyone in Charlotte. It's still dragging post Skyler.
Noticed him across the street from me, waiting at the Park Slope the Hertz rental place across the street. Okay, sorry for the long trip yet. So he started a business in college. He started multiple venture-backed businesses since then. General Assembly sold to Adecco for $412 million. Congrats. You started Common and less of an exit there. Okay. And now you start Thesis Driven, which is actually
Okay.
No outside capital. So if you're dealing with VCs twice, you're at three times. I'll go push canvas. Okay. I'm really curious, besides taking money this time around for this, what are you doing differently that you wouldn't have known to do?
First, and for having me here. Thanks everyone for one. So this is really hard to picture because there's like a million different little things, and it is, frankly more on the frameworks and how I approach kind of flow than it is on the big decision level. Obviously, you mentioned not taking outside capital. I think all three businesses I started took too much money too early. In hindsight, one of those, in general, essentially, we started this business about teaching people, fundamental digital skills. A year later, upon I was on stage saying everyone's got code, it's like you were in a place where you maybe did that. So, a lot of this is just about a little more if I could pick one thing that I think I've gotten much better at is just decide where to put time and attention. Instead of time and attention and money and what is a food use of those things. There's a great program to say, I'm a fan of his essays. That's called How to Lose Time. And I'm raising my hand if you've read this guy. One, if you haven't, absolutely go read it. Yes. And it basically gives the analogy of money and says people are pretty good, smart people are pretty good at avoiding wasting money because, if you're like, I'm going to blow money on, buying at a giant screen TV, not that those are expensive anymore, but like you lose money by making bad investments because those alarm bells don't go off in your head to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be spending money on this. This is a bad use of dollars. So instead you make investments thinking that it's a good use of money. It's how smart people go back. He draws the analogy that says people lose time in the same way. If you sit in front of the couch for 4 hours on Tuesday afternoon watching reruns, alarm bells start going off in your head and being like, this is a waste of time. I should have been doing this. You waste time by investing in bad things that don't actually lead you where you want to go. So I think just keeping that framework in mind and having a better risk check around what makes sense simple lessons is the biggest thing you should learn.
I recently hosted a weekly newsletter of mine that especially if you're starting from zero and you're bootstrapping your company, you're ultimately trying to raise money at 6, 10, 12, whatever $1 million valuation. So you have to create $10 million in enterprise value with your time. And then I don't know however savings you have, but let's say you have the ability to like bootstrap for 9 months or bootstrap for a year. So that means there's actually an amount of value you need to create in that time. And I did all the numbers, like even if you were working 996 and all that sort of stuff, the numbers were redeemed was like founders need to create between $1,000 and $2,000 of enterprise value for every. Yeah.
We started putting cost of capitals on every dollar we spend. And if you're you start asking about cost of capital, it's very crazy making conversation very fast. That's like, wait, every dollar we put in today basically has more than double in a year. More than that, based on the expectations of the capital we have around the table, ourselves as founders, all of that. So it actually think, well, I shouldn't go too far down that path. And this is the thing, we'll get into this, of just like the balance between, being very rigid and disciplined about it.
So as a founder, we say, hey, do everything like taking out the trash. If you can pay someone to take out the trash for less than $1,000 now, you probably do that because you got to create the value somewhere else. So what are the mental models that guide some of your decisions that you like didn't have the first time around?
Well, I think one kind of Zen color beat myself already of a business is it's neither as good as it seems or as bad. And I think I had heard that early in my days as a founder, but like you really started realizing it as you see a lot of shit. As a founder, there's kind of a natural tendency to like get really hyped when things are great. Like you land a client, you hire this rock star, and you close the C round, and you start, you pull up Zillow and you start looking at vacation. Shit happens, and that rock star engineer leaves. The amazing account churns. You get told no a bunch. You have still have a Series A raise, and like everything is terrible, and like you should just go back to the and all of that. And I think one of the learned things and frameworks that I've just had to cultivate in myself to keep myself sane through all of this is it's never as good as it seems, nor bad. You've got to really intentionally temper yourself in the good times when things are going well. It's hard to do. It's annoying to do it, but remind yourself of that as well when things are totally going off the rails, because they've been.
So I imagine you've learned a thing or two, but there's probably some things you haven't learned. And I'm curious, like, are there some mistakes that you keep making even now? Maybe you said that.
Yes. Goal is you make differences.
One of the mistakes you still make.
I don't even think that is a mistake, but it's tendencies. And you learn your tendencies as a manager, as a founder, as a business person. One of the problems I would say, if you're going to do this job, is that you can really lean into your tendencies and your balance and not have as much outside pressure to extend and do the hard thing and do the work. And
I feel like the thing.
now, I'm not a board, it's just me. I have an employees, but that's different. And so when you have a board and you have co-founders and you have senior executives working alongside you, and you have a coach and all of that, you get to identify your tendencies as a person and as a manager that will lead to mistakes. So if looking at it not as just like, oh, if I fed up, like, I made a wrong strategic decision there, but like, what tendencies do I have that lead me to make those decisions? And can I address it on that higher level of like, okay, I'm a people pleaser. I don't like having hard conversations. I want to meet people happy. That is a real, because as a manager, you end up having a lot of really hard conversations. And so I had to do the hard work, get General Assembly and comment of like, no, sorry, that person isn't working out. It's been, 6 weeks since you hired them. They're not getting their KPIs. You got to fire them.
They're trying to hard. Interesting. We feel like two folks.
So you have to be aware of those tendencies that lead to the mistakes. And I didn't think about it and answer your question less on the level of like, of course, I didn't think about the mistakes I made in the early days of the General Assembly and like certainly things I would not do today. But what tendencies do I have that led? And how do I address that at on a more fundamental level before this instance?
So, Thesis Driven. Some people have seen the content that you've put out. Any other Thesis Driven subscribers? And I'm gonna say I just like knowing about that being built around neighborhood and stuff. And for anybody I've met, they know that I constantly push them to get out there, develop audience, like put content out to get them potential customers, as audience members. And I'm curious, once you have an audience of potential customers, you can build different types of businesses on top of that. And you are doing that now. But I'm curious as to your thoughts as to whether being like audience, not necessarily a media company, and maybe you can sort of delineate the difference there, is viable in other areas. Like, is there make sense to be a thesis driven of other areas that starts off with, well, let me gather all my potential customers, have them follow me, and then I'll sell them something.
So, we're only in real estate and building this in real estate because I know real estate and I love real estate. But let me think that from the theory of capital for a second and say, oh, why don't we do it this way? I'm actually very conservative. I'm very risk averse. I don't like taking a lot. So I say to people in my life, that's insane. And so all these businesses have been very successful exit. But I should main tendency standpoint. And a lot of the decisions I make, good and bad, are about mitigating risk. And so one of the approaches I had in the early days of getting out of my last venture back startup, how do I want to approach this next phase? well, I don't necessarily know and have a vision for like what is the product I will sell into the real estate industry, but I do know there is a need for really high quality storytelling in real estate around relevant topics in the built world, technology, finance, true policy, all of this fun stuff. So let's start doing that. That will build an audience, and that audience will be a great starting point to prototype and test out ideas and get from 0 to 1, get feedback faster on problems. And that was the idea when we started it, 4 years ago, that we were going to launch, products every 3 to 6, 9 months in this audience, to this community we built. And so far we launched 5 different things. Data products in particular have been the most effective. It's very cash flow. And so I love this approach of an audience brand first business, is I think it dramatically mitigates the risk of going and building a product with my audience. And there's other ways to achieve it. I mean, you see a lot of software companies now doing these pilot markets.
And I do think that go to market and the time and effort spent to get as many customers as you have that are currently following and paid up following is probably the number one thing the founders trouble with, right? And not being able to capture enough customers quickly enough. And starting from there, I think it's a really interesting take. I'm curious though, obviously you have more than just a following because there's a subscription business there. But on the other hand, whenever I say things like thought leadership, a lot of people glaze over, roll up a little bit in their mouth. It's fine. Some people feel like it's a vanity thing. Some people feel like it doesn't alliance a lot of followers versus like there's leverage here actually. Like getting enough following enables them to do something, or it just isn't effective.
Yeah, a lot of thought leadership is just the pure man thing. And so it goes back to why are you doing it? Like, what are the goals you are looking to achieve, and how clearly and quantitatively are those goals articulated? And then are you able to achieve those goals with what you're doing? I know that sounds like tautological and it's dumb, but like there's sort of no other way to evaluate it than, media companies have quote massive email list numbers and viewer numbers. We've done media partnerships with them. All of them never sales because there's not a relationship. Their subscribers, their emails don't know who I am and don't know who we are. So it is not, you're correct. It's not just about building a following. It's about building that trust and relationship. Your readers, your viewers, like what me and your own album, it is so important. And we started doing this actually at Common, running these quarterly public capital markets summits where we get together all these real estate investors, developers, and groups that were interested in building innovative things in the brick and mortar world. I feel like there was something going on here, and like there was a community united.
So and that's something I think about a lot when during the pandemic, when everybody went sort of newsletter crazy, a couple folks in startup world built up to some like really, really big audiences very quickly. And I've been writing my own newsletter since like 2004 and have largely done it organically, but not to the same numbers. I may not have those numbers, but I feel like most of the people who read have like into an event or know me through something, and there's like it's a more meaningful reader base than something growth not because they sign up to get benefit.
Type relationship with your readers than you are. And part of that is because you as a person, you as a human being telling stories. And the number one mistake I see founders make when they go to build their brand and build an audience isn't actually founders' office moving forward. I think a lot of people make fun of set crowd out there. And the reason that it's fun to make fun of them because they're very easy to make fun of. And you should make fun of them. But, they're not necessarily the people who are really fucking up. The people who are like not doing a good job of it are those that kind of hide behind their marketing team and like they only post through their corporate brand and like, like everyone has that, but like you have to be out as a person, as a human telling human stories. It's all about storytelling. And that's your foundation. That's your point on which to build. And you could tell genuine, earnest, relevant stories, or you could, talk about your grind and your 996 and get out at 4 a.m, loading weights. And like, those are choices you can make, but you should be done.
So you're selling into an industry that I would say, in my experience, is not the most trusting industry. I have a couple of New York real estate family type folks who, the idea of investing in a startup company at a $10 billion pre-money valuation that has no revenue whatsoever feels like, feels like wrestling to disaster. I had a very funny conversation with one of my other things around like, so what's the percentage success of all of these companies? It's like, oh, so do they have assets when they go out of business? No, they got a couple of every question I answered was the wrong answer. For somebody who like owns a bunch of multifamily real estate and his rent-a-cats come in every month and all of that other stuff. I think there's a lesson in that in the, everybody here is promising things to skeptical audiences that hasn't happened. You are selling into, I think, an inherently skeptical, like, I need to get paid at the end of the month, or what have you done for me lately, and not people prone to imagining big, wild growth stories and all of that kind of stuff. But what are the lessons you can think of, like, gaining trust from, I think, in a more skeptical?
It's in Dallas, Texas, and it's basically like you're meeting with a B2C thing at Unilever, like it's the same vibe. It's just like going in consumer business center, part of the professional managerial class, like anyone else at a Fortune 500 company. Whereas in New York, you go to these like incredibly shady or window spaces, like a Cali couple. Like guys living in New Jersey with gold chains and all that. So it just, I want to say it's very different. But the generalized lesson of that is no industry is a model. And one of the best things you can do to build trust in a skeptical industry is get you interested in innovation and interested in doing things differently and turn to your advocates and withhold their stories. Empower them to talk about what they're doing with your technology, with your product, whatever. And so like we would be nowhere if we didn't have innovative developers, real estate investors who are like really inviting Thesis Driven and like reading our stuff and sharing it around and like letters and like, being a part of the conversation in a way that makes us way less right-wing and weird and alien to the guy in New Jersey.
Gotcha. So that guy's not a friend. Okay. So I've never had a I've never had a non-New York City address, so I'm very shocked. So you no longer write everything for Thesis Driven, but I am serious about like for those folks who are wanting to put more stuff out there, feel like they need to do that. There are systems, hacks, habits for mixing in your writing time while you're like at the same time supposed to be writing.
It's hard. Like there's no that I don't have to this. I would say start if there's something good about having a subscription model. I would say, and I've been doing this 3 years with a paid subscription model, and at this point, our paid subscriber is on less than 10% of Thesis Driven's revenue, which is tiny, but it maintains discipline of the publication that is actually looking for. Because if I knew that everyone was just like happy to be there, free subscriber, movies, I'm like, I just got a lot of stuff going on right now. I just can't do what I was doing. But the fact that there are actual cases of Hargreaves, I mean, they implemented that, and that matters. And it's not like everyone's sure, as much as like I wanted to live like that. And so, yeah, we publish a minimum twice a week every single week. Something written by me, something written by guest writers. I would say there's often not motivation to do it. But like discipline that.
Would you consider yourself a writer before you started this?
No, I do enjoy it. Most of the time. I do not.
I'm talking about time and effort. Usually you go ahead your third and you want to be present for everyone and you're running a company at the same time. And so like what have you learned about and protecting time and presence for family as you go?
I mean, it's hard because there's no easy answer. I drop the kids off almost every morning at school, and I, go to bed 4 or 5 minutes a week. So it's tough. And honestly, one of the reasons why I chose this business is because I don't have to be on the road. When the pandemic hit, I was kind of a property management business. So I was on flights every single week. Because we were in 12 different cities, we started as CPO, and the pandemic hit suddenly. It was obviously jarring from the business standpoint, but also from the family standpoint. Like now suddenly I was with the kids every single day. And we had two, we had 4-year-old, and the other one, I don't know, I wanted to have the little personalities, and I was like, I'd never spend any time. Because, living in like 4-year-old kind of dominated and that was really bad. It really shook me. I was like, I never want to be in that position again. And so when I transitioned out of common in December 22 and thought about like, what is the next business I want to build? One of my red lines was like, I don't want to be on the road. There's people who work hard. Like I come in bed 8:30, I take back up to go until 11. I'm still working 10, 11-hour days, but you just gotta have balance. And it does change your filter of what easy day.
AI is going to enable you to scale, and it's going to solve all of our societal problems. And at least that's the amount of funding that has gone into AI. Because if it doesn't, we're sort of all in trouble. And I have to ask the sort of token AI question. And particularly the fact that you're in the content business and you've done something interesting to read about it before. But like, what's your like near term and then maybe longer term view estimating and overestimating about?
So I'll answer that general about some implications on the content side, which obviously I'll get to that. Overall, I think we are overestimating the impact of AI, good and bad, on the 12th estimating it on the 5 to 7 to 10 year horizon, good and particularly bad. On the content side, a lot of people ask me, like, isn't this just all going to be replaced by AI? The broad answer is yes, but probably not in the ways that people expect today. But one thing it has done is it's really raised the bar and put a premium on what content, what insights, what caliber of information you have to be producing to create insights that someone can't get through a good ChatGPT for. That bar is really high. Because if you know what you're doing on front engineering standpoint, like you can get some pretty incredible insights out of LLMs today. So we really have to be pushing ourselves to like, it's about data that's not out there. It's about access no one else has. We really have to take it to the next level from a content standpoint, but also it's a premium on that content. If you are able to create those insights that someone can trade them that they would not be able to get through that ChatGPT. There's a lot of ways to monetize that. You're kind of, selling yourself short if you're monetizing that through advertising, maybe just paid subscription. A lot to be done there. I would say it is wrecking the traditional media business. I mean, we just posted a month ago, full-time flooded by that week. So the way we've not been for another because all of the SEO content farms get wrecked. Traditional media is obviously been, that's your fight for quite some time, but AI is kind of mop up the,
So, I hear that. Your point about getting access to information other people haven't reminds me of a portfolio in the ag tech space who decided to do like a state of the industry survey, and they sold to a bunch of like indoor growers of there's some stat like 70% of all tomatoes in North America are grown indoors or something, and specialized in mine, and it gets kind of screwy. And so they did a customer both a customer survey and just an overall like the state of indoor hags. And they asked all those people questions that like no one actually had the answers to at scale. And that annual industry survey they did became their largest lead gen at Cruiser because it was no one had this information and it's not anything you could look up. It gave them an excuse to talk to a bunch of customers and other customers are interested. And I'm like, are you using hardware or software to grow more tomatoes indoors? And it became like very much like an insider.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think about how do you just like the data, the customer list, contacts, relationships you have to create information that no one else can access. I mean, and you really have to go back to like the very first principles of content marketing. Like, think you're Michelin, you're a tire company, it's 1900. Like, how do you sell more tires? Well, like, nobody has any information on like what restaurants are good there. Let's go like make a restaurant guide. And that'll give people a reason to drive somewhere. Right? That's how we get the Michelin guides. You have to go back and not like you forget that, but like you have to go back to level of those principles of content marketing and like, how do we leverage the data and information we have and create?
Last question, and before we take a couple of questions and move on to our last but not least panel today. So after you sold GA, I imagine it bought a fair amount of credibility in the venture space. Like folks wondering what you're going to be doing next, probably making fundraising a little easier. And I'm curious as to your take as to what kind of credibility that actually buy with VCs. And did it turn out to be relevant, right? Like people thought I was good because I sold a business and like, are you good in those ways now? So, like for those people in the room, the majority of the people in the room that don't have a $400 million exit behind them, how can they replicate that kind of credit?
So I would go back to like thinking about what your goals are and with whom are you trying to cultivate credibility? Because I will say, when you sell a business for 400 and some million and create generational wealth and when you sell a business for half of your breath stack and the common equity gets wiped, and I've done both of those things, you get the same congrats bro messages. You get it. And so you have to like drill into the next level of who you're trying. And is it VCs? Because after you sold a company for 400 million, honestly, you don't need the VCs until your business is already at a place where it should be able to stand on its own two legs from a metric standpoint. And obviously, of course it helps. I'm not going to say it doesn't help. One thing I always try to do just as once again, pushing against my tendencies and pushing myself further is always trying to sell into people who are at the fringes of who I should reasonably be selling to. And so when you're pitching the head of Graystar, Hines, JLL, and the big real estate company about doing some partnership with Thesis Driven, they don't care that I sold a business in a related industry before. It's like they truly don't care. And so I think if you're doing it right, you actually don't feel it because you're always pushing yourself to sell to someone who's probably going to say no, but that pushes you to the next level.
Question for the audience. Go ahead.
A very simple question, but if you're writing content now and sending it out in your newsletter, do you just do it the traditional way?
Yeah, great question. So basically, how do I use AI in content production process? Because I can use it. It's a tool, but I see a lot of people use it in the wrong ways, in my view, today, based on what it's capable of. So it's great at structuring thoughts. I can rant for 15 minutes into a voice dictation thing, get text, upload that to GPT, and it will actually structure it pretty well and be like, hey, here's some like conclusions, ideas based on that ramble. Very good at that. It's also a great editor. So I write things myself and then upload it to paste it into GPT, and you like find all the spelling errors, grammatical errors, awkward phrasings, and like, maybe 60% of the things are correct. And the others, I'm like, no, I actually meant to say it that way. But I don't let it write straight. it is good at marketing. So it does write up my marketing copy, read everything it produces. So I found that because like this was a lot. Will it eventually be in a place with like custom instructions, personas, etc., where it can actually produce a thesis driven letter? Well, actually, yes, certainly. But the point is that the insights, the interviews, the quotes, the data, all of that, that has to be recorded. If that makes sense. Like that can be what's coming from you. It also makes it up after that.
I'll add on to that. I just recently submitted a book to be published with an editor, and wrote a list of chapter titles and gave it my book proposal. And the chapter titles, like, I knew what it meant, or at least I thought I did. And I had ChatGPT take a guess as to, like, given what this book is about, what do you think this chapter is about? And it would take a guess, and a lot of times it would be wrong, but then it's, oh, it's actually more like this than it is like this. And I got to the point where I had a chapter summary, like 2 or 3 paragraphs for each of the chapters that I wanted to do. And once I had all of those summaries, then I submitted it back and I said, okay, this is basically what my book is about. If you are an early stage founder raising money, what am I missing here? And it gave me a whole list of like, well, you didn't cover this, you didn't cover this. So I use it as a gut check for my audience because it clearly reads a lot of things written to founders. So I'll get a sense of like what founder I can look for. The other thing as a time hack, sometimes when I go to the gym, I do the voice recording and I will like dictate a bunch of meandering and written post that comes out. It's all my thoughts, right? But just in terms of a time savings and time hack, and all the founders in the room probably wish they made more time to go on walks or work out or run or whatever the thing that is not like sitting behind the desk. And so I do a lot of content voice to definitely do that. Actually, I just use the Apple, like, as now you can get captions from the voice memos. They're okay, but ChatGPT like things. Something.
You're both now content producers. I'd love to hear, how do you think about your
customer page?
your editing process? Are you perfectionists? Do you try to like really get it? Do you ever put stuff out there that you're like, I don't know, I'm like not fully in on this, maybe people will like it? When you're just expressing your thoughts, how refined do you try to get? I mean, do you ask people for feedback, or are you just putting it out there?
I never seen good feedback. I try to catch most of the spell in the math players. He is a massive out there because I hate editing my own work. I also like, when I write super weird, I literally sit down and write linearly the piece in finished form. I don't do drafts. I just like, I know that's super weird, but that's just my process. I really try and have to be intentional, push the boundaries of our scope and what we're doing. So I've been doing a lot of policy stuff lately, which I posted that maybe I'm a little less comfortable with. As guest writers obviously help there. Because I think the bar scope is good for us. I think we have just as a publication, I think it's for instance, we just get too wonky and niche, and there's like 500, state private equity wonks who read it. And it's like, okay, that's not what we're trying to get here. But that's kind of where my brain is. So I think we have to be really into diversifying and getting less weird.
In making time and coming up with time that I could and we have one more pick in.